Hi, I'll start shortly. I'm just waiting for some more people to join in, and then I'll get going. I'm gonna wait till about 5 to 10 minutes in, depending on how full the meeting gets. I'm seeing in the chat someone says they can't hear my voice. Um, can you hear me now? Is anyone else having trouble hearing me? I did confirm that my mic is working. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah, sorry. So maybe my problem because I didn't join as an audio.
Cool, no problem. Yeah, as long as you can hear me, we're good.
Yeah, I can hear you pretty good. Thank you.
Cool, no problem.
I am joining you from Australia.
Oh, welcome. Yeah, welcome. It's cool to hear we've got some international people as well. Did not
Yeah,
expect that.
yeah,
So this is the second workshop in this series. Did you catch the
yeah.
first one?
Yeah, I went through the video that you shared.
Perfect.
That was like introduction to the Python.
Yes. So today I'm just going to basically do another just introduction to some extra concepts. It's basically introduction part 2. And
Yeah,
then from the third one onwards, I'll jump into the Python for data science, which is the main topic
that's
of
okay
this
for
series of
me.
workshops. Perfect.
Yeah. Even though today will be introduction, that's okay for me. I will follow this kind of workshop until it becomes advanced.
100%. Cool. So this is the second workshop in this series of workshops. And sorry, I'm just going to mute everyone. You guys are more than welcome to unmute yourself at any time if you want to ask a question. It's just to keep it clear from the get-go, and then you can unmute yourself when you want to say something. Okay. So in the first workshop, we just went over the basics of all the different things that we have in Python, what each variable kind is. We made a basic application where you've got pretty much a creature in Python that you then play like a Tamagotchi. It's a basic programming toy that just shows off some of the concepts inside of Python. During this workshop, I will be going over some more concepts in Python. It's pretty much introduction part 2 to Python. And yeah, let's get going. So in the previous workshop, what I went over, let me just get all my okay, cool. In the previous workshop, we went over what each variable type is, and we used variables separately, and it was very much a script. It would run the script, and it would just do what happens inside of the script, and that's that. During this workshop, I'm gonna introduce classes, and I'll explain what a class is and how that functions and how you would use them. Then I'm also going to do some modules. Then we're going to talk about how you can interact with all these things and how you can do some a bit more advanced behaviors with the basics that you already know. And then from there, we're just going to basically wrap up the Tamagotchi app so that for the workshop part 3, we are ready to jump into actually making a data science relevant application. Cool. Let's get going. So the first concept that I'm going to introduce in this workshop is a class. So in the previous workshop, we went over how you would interact with a dictionary. And what a dictionary was, this is a quick refresher, is we would have a variable name. But inside the variable name, it would have these different properties, and each one of the properties would have a value, and those could be of different kinds of values, like a bool or a string or an int or a float, and all those kind of different things. And that was really cool because it's a collection of variables that you can bind together and have a collective bit of information. But that is only a bit of information. All the functions we would then have is we would have separate functions that we would use to do all the different pieces and parts of behaviors. Like, for example, if we wanted to then feed our creature, we would have a separate function that would then feed the creature, and so forth and so on. We would just have all these separate things. But the feeding of the creature is very much tied to the creature itself. So it doesn't make sense to have them as separate concepts. We might as well build all of that together into a single object that is then your creature, and then you can feed your creature, and it has these base behaviors associated with it. So let's quickly go over all the classes. A class is almost like a dictionary, except the differentiating factor between a class and a dictionary is if you have a class, then you have your values that you put inside. So it can be, in this case, I'm just going to call it data, and that can have our dictionary in it that we can then put all our data inside of. So then you could have all your values inside of the class. Okay, but the problem of the cool part of classes that then happens is with classes, you can do with classes, you can do both the dictionary with your data inside of it, as well as you can then go and you can define your, let me just fix this. You can define your functionality inside of this attached to your data. So then, if you go and you define your feeding inside of it as well, now you've got a creature that has data in it and an activity linked to the class. And that's pretty much the logic behind a class. It's a way to tie both functionality as well as data together inside of a single container, instead of just having a dictionary where you just have data. Okay, so that was just to describe what it is. So let's actually write a class that is similar to the data objects that we had before, where we had a data object for each creature. That was the name, the hunger value, the age, the weight, and a little image with a string. Let's define a class that has all of this inside, as well as some functionality. And let's make it do the same thing that we had before, but within a class now. And then I'll go on to doing this stuff like saving and how you would do the saving that we covered in the end of the previous video in a generic way to allow both the saving of a collection of creatures or a single creature and all of that using the power of classes. So if you're defining a class, you first start with the keyword class. As you would with a function, start with def. With a class, you start with class. Then you put in the name of the, let me just making it. Then you put in the name of your class. In this case, it would be creature, because we want to call our class creature. Then you put your colon, as you do when you end any definition with Python, you put your colon there, and then you indent. With Python, you indent instead of using brackets. So we've got our class creature that defines our creature. Then inside of our creature, we once again want to have all the data of our creature. But instead of defining the data default like we did before, where we have the name, the hunger, the weight, the age, and all of that, all bits by pieces, I'm just going to have the data there as a empty object for now, but it's still a dictionary because the two curly brackets are there. Cool. And then there we go. We've now got a creature that can contain data. That's a class definition. Cool. Then we want to make this class do something. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to just feed our creature. So this is where okay, let's actually start from the beginning and I'll cover instantiation now and stuff a bit later. So to use this data and actually define stuff inside of a class, we have to define something called a constructor. Because the thing that makes classes special is you can have a duplicate of a class repeatedly. Similar to how you can have multiple strings, you can have multiple creatures with different names and different weights and all of that, but they're still of a type creature. So the way that you then create one and what the default values of this thing is, we then define using something called a constructor. So a constructor in Python is also a function, and it has some special notation where it's 2 underscores. Then you say init, and then 2 more underscores at the end. Then what you feed into the constructor is you always feed in a variable called self, and self, it just defines the object that this function was called on. In this case, it's always going to be our instance of the creature. So we've got our self, but then we also want to provide the data for this class, because there's a data variable in here, and we can refer to it through other ways after we created it. But we want to, when we create this new creature, define this data. So then you put your colon, because after you define the function, you put a colon, you indent, and then this is where the self comes in. So this self.data refers to the current instance of the feature, the data inside of it. And we're just going to put that into, we're going to put into that the data that you provide through this function. So how you would use this is then at some point later on, I want to replicate the cat that I've had before. I want to replicate this data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and say cat is equal to creature, and then I put the 2 circular brackets because I'm creating a new creature. So it's this defines what it looks like and what it does inside. This says I'm going to create something of this kind. So what I put inside is the data that I have here. So let's take that data and put it in there. Cool. So now we no longer need this cat because we've got an equivalent of this cat here, but it's a creature. So then we've now saved this file as creature.py. We've now effectively got the same thing as we had when we simply put this down. This can be seen as an equivalent of this because it has data inside of it. Just if you refer to the data, you then have to go cat.data instead of just straight up calling the cat because it's inside of a class. So it's a special type that you've now created. Okay. So this is equivalent to this because it's the same data reference. Okay. I hope that makes sense to anyone. If I'm not making sense at any point in time, please feel free to either send a message in the chat or to unmute yourself and say that I'm losing something, then I will rephrase. So then if I go print on this cat.data, I should get an equivalent to if I go at dictionary. Cat.data and cat dictionary is going to be the same because this is a data object inside of the creature that I supply with the same data the cat dictionary has. So let's double check that this is true. So I'm going to run my code, and the way I'm running it is I hold in shift while it's white here. Shift is just a shortcut method that I'm using. So if I right click here and open the PowerShell window, it is immediately at the location where my script is at. And I'll go Python. Now I'm just hitting tab, I run it, and there's two of exactly the same as the data equivalent. I'm seeing here in chat, someone's telling me my creature function is giving an error. What do you mean your creature function is giving an error? What error are you receiving? If you tell me what error you're receiving, I can help you debug. If I see a response, I'll refer to that. I wasn't just going to continue explaining a few more things. Cool. So now we've got a creature that has data in it. So let's actually make this.
Sorry for interruption.
No problem at all.
Mine also sends error for creature class. It's would can we have the code that you are typing?
Yeah, this is the code that's in here.
Or do you want me to share the error that I am getting
yes,
in
please
the
tell
chat?
me what the error you are getting is. You can put it in the chat, or you can just tell me the keywords that exist in the error. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy your code here and paste it in. Okay, so the problem that you're facing at the moment is that your indentation is having a problem. So because your indentation of your cat was the same as it was as the class definition, we were getting an error because it thought this cat setting equal to a value is the same as the class, where it does not exist inside of the class. It's just a separate creation of this creature. And you can't create a class of the same type inside of a class. So if the spacing there is the same, it's seen as if it's part of this class, whereas if you put it at the beginning, it's not. So let's actually run your code. I'm going to take your code. I'm going to replace mine now. And let's run it. And it runs. So it was simply that you were having the problem with your indentation.
Yes,
The cat was
thank you.
in. Cool, perfect. Cool, I hope that makes sense. Cool, so now you can see the cat dictionary and the data inside of the cat class. The creature class called cat, the variable cat, is the same. I'm going to delete the cat dictionary because we no longer need that. Take that away. Cool. But now we're doing all these separate things. We actually want this to do something with the data inside of it. So let's start making it do stuff with the stuff inside of it. I see you're using 3 space and I'm using 4 space. That doesn't matter. Cool. So let's define a function inside of our class that is going to do something. I'll post the code there as I'm done typing it. I can do that, no problem. I was simply using the data from the previous workshops, so I assume everyone had that. But it's cool, I can post it there if you'd like. Okay. So then, just regarding giving you guys code and all that, the previous workshop I gave, I shared my workshop notes before I started teaching the class, and that made a lot of sense because it made sense in that way. But there's a lot more value in understanding the concepts than having the exact same code as me. So I thought for this workshop, I'm going to try it out where you guys write your own code, and then I'm going to, after the workshop, share my notes again, just to see how that works out. And then we can try a few different things with these workshops until we nail down the exact procedure. So I'm also new to the digital workshop thing. It's an interesting process. Okay, so we've got a definition here, and I'm simply going to start by using the basic just let's get a response and make sure everything's working. So the first one is, I'm going to call it show. And that doesn't take anything in other than self. So this is using that self variable that we used here previously. And as you saw here with the initialization where we created an instance of creature, we didn't fill in the self. The reason we didn't fill in the self is Python automatically fills in the self for you. So here in the show, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to say self.data, and then I want to inside this data of ours, the thing I want to access is I simply want to get the photo. So then I'm going to get the photo. Because I know my data that I put into this creature has a photo in it. And what I want to do with this photo is I just want to print it. So I'm just going to print my photo. So then if I take this away, I took away the print at the bottom, and now I've got a function inside of my class called show. So now I created a new variable called cat that has a creature type class inside of the cat. So I'm going to go cat.show. And what that would do is, now as the program runs, it defines the class cat, then it creates, defines the class creature, so it creates a new creature inside of cat, and then I'm just going to have it show me the photo of this creature. So let's have a look. If I run it, we just see our little text emoji. Success. So you can define functions inside of creature, and as you see here, I didn't use the self again. Self is just referring to the instance of the variable of the class that you created, and the one that called it. So that's the way that you access the values inside of the class using the self. self is always provided by Python for you. So you just put it in there and you don't have to provide the reference for it. If you do, it won't assume it's the self. It will assume it's another parameter inside of the function, and it will just ignore it. Cool. There we go. We've now got a feature that we have show, and cool. So to recreate what we had before with the whole feed thing, let's quickly do that. So we're going to define another function. We're going to call it feed. And then this one also takes in self. And then you put your colon. And then I'm just going to once again use the code that I used inside of the so I'm going to use the code that I used in the previous workshop for the feeding of the creature. So I'm just going to copy that from the previous workshops. And I'm just going to fix the indentation. So it's important to note, so this is not going to work at all because I just copied the code. I'll replace it out now. It's important to note that with your if, the stuff that needs to happen if your first statement in your if is true is that it has to be indented to the if. And same with the else, it needs to be indented one level. It's the same as you would have brackets in other programming languages. So to refer to the hungry value inside of the data inside of our creature, we use the self again. So it's self dot data, because it's now called data. And then we just replace that out throughout. Cool. So now the feed function simply checks if you're hungry with an if. If you are hungry, it sets it to false and it increases your weight by 1. If you are not hungry, then it simply tells you it's not hungry. Fantastic. So now we've got a cat that we show the cat, and then I'm going to call the new variable I've got called feed after the new function I've got. I just need to close the application here. I am getting wild sounds. Fantastic. Okay. So we create a creature, we assign a data to it. This data gets used by both our functions using the self to know the class that the creature after function was called from. So show is called from cat, which is a creature, and inside the creature there is a data. And that's basically how the logic order works on that self variable. Cool. And we're going to show, we're going to feed, and that's on that. Cool. So now we've got a creature that eats, and there we go. Cool. So that's just basically defining a class. Is there anyone that doesn't understand the concept of a class before I go on? Because I'm going to start using them quite a bit now. Okay. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I'm assuming that that makes sense. Cool. So then the next step that we did for the feature that we had before was this. Can I go through my feed function again? Cool, no problem at all. So basically what feed does is it uses this self variable, so self supplied by Python once again. So if I call feed here from any instance of the class creature, I call feed on any one of those. So cat's a variable, it contains an instance. So it's pretty much using the template of creature to define what it looks like inside and what behaviors it has attached to it, what functions it has attached to it, and all that. I create one of those, and then I put the data inside of it. So then show uses a bit of that data, and it just prints it. What feed does is it uses that self again, and then it does an if check. So indented underneath the read function, the first indentation layer is if. So it checks if the data inside of the local data inside of the instance of creature, the value hungry inside of that, if it is true. If it is true, it just sets that same variable to false, and then it increases the weight by 1. And then it just says thing. Is that a constructor of the creature class? So this is the instancing code of the creature class. So in other programming languages, you would have a variable name, so var name, and then you would go as equal to new creature, and then you would put your data in here. But in Python, you don't have to use the new keyword. So Python is a language that basically gets rid of a lot of the extra syntax and just makes it as basic and simple as possible. So Python did away with the new. So you just call this class as a function, basically, because all of these functions look very similar, and that's because you're basically calling the class as a function. And what happens then is it runs this function inside of your class definition, this init, which then the self is once again just saying from which object it was called, which instance of this feature class it was called, the self, and then the data is the value it takes in. So it takes in the data that I provide here. So I can actually flatten that to a single line, or maybe do that for clarity's sake. Cool. Yeah, so comment there. Cool. Yeah. So you just call a class definition like a function in Python. It did away with a lot of the extra things that you don't need. I am missing some brackets here. Cool. So what we can then do is, in the previous example, I had both a cat and a mouse. So let's also make a mouse. So I'm going to call it mouse. I'm going to make my mouse also an instance of creature. And then inside of that, I have to then provide data. So I'm just going to use the data from my previous example again. Flatten that for clarity's sake. Cool. So now I've got a cat and a mouse. Both of them are an instance of my class definition called creature. So both of them have the option to show and feed, which is the functionality inside of them, as well as they contain data. So now I can do the same thing with my mouse. So I can go mouse.show and mouse.feed. Cool. So if I run this now, I got my cat. My cat was hungry, so I ate. I get my mouse. My mouse was not hungry, so it didn't eat. And that's just the different parts of the if, because the one was hungry and the other one was not. Cool. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Cool. So from there, what we did with the previous one, we put both of these features inside of a list, which I'm not going to do here. I'll explain why just now. I'm going to create a different class that's going to effectively then be the main pet management class. And I'm going to save out the data and manage all of that for us. Whereas with this, we don't want to do it per creature. We want to have a bigger thing. Cool. Okay, so then the next concept that I'm going to introduce in this workshop is the concept of a module. So how a module works in Python is it's very much you have a piece of code that you have in a different script that you're going to bring into this script and use. So in the previous workshop, we imported JSON at some point, and then we used that in our save and our load functions to do the JSON values with that. So we're going to create our own module like that and import it here from the top. So what that module is going to be, in this case, is we're going to create a module. So let's get a new file. And what this file is going to do is it's going to do our saving and loading. So the saving and loading we're doing is we're just taking our data structures and we're sending them down into some JSON. So let's do that. And if we do this, we then once again just import JSON. I'm going to save this file as state save.py. py is Python's file extension. Cool. So I'm importing JSON, so I want to use JSON to save and load the JSON. And then I'm going to create a new class. This class I'm going to call save state. I named my file wrong, sorry. So I'm just going to rename my file. Cool. My file is called save state. So I've got a importing of JSON, so I get all the functionality and all the functions of JSON. I've got a class called state save that I am defining as that. Cool. Inside of here, what I want this class to do is this class doesn't necessarily contain its own JSON, its own data. It's simply going to interact with bits of data. So I'm not going to define any values inside of it. I'm just going to define a function. So I'm going to define a function called save. Let's do a small s, save. And as with any function inside of a class or function or method inside of a class, you have yourself as the first parameter that you pass towards it. Cool. And then the code that we used for our saving to JSON is we went and we created a new variable that we set equal to opening a file, which is then the file name. In this case, save JSON. And then I want to, because I'm saving, I want to write to the file. So you put the second parameter of that to W. Cool. So now we've got this variable. What we want to do is we want to write to this variable. So I'm actually going to use that JSON that we imported here at the top. What we're going to do is we're going to dump some data. So the dumping of data that we're going to do is we say dump. Actually, let's modify this for a start and actually pass it the data. And then we'll do inheritance after this, because the modules first and then inheritance. So we're going to do save, and then we want to save data. And put a variable there that is the data. So then in our JSON dump, the first thing we want to do is we want to refer to that data of ours. And then we're going to refer to our variable here that is the open file, because we were going to write to this file, and that's that. And then we just want to have some feedback for the user to know that something actually happened. And then we're going to call it saved data. Cool. So it's just a single class with a save. As you notice in this one, I don't have an instantiator that sets a default value like I have with the creature where I've got this in it, because I don't have data in here and I don't have to set anything at the start. It's technically best practice to leave one in there, but Python is a very forgiving language that allows you to not have one, and then later if you want to add one, you can just add one in. So I'm not going to define a constructor from the start, which is this init function here. It's called when you create one. It's called the so classes are not the same as modules. What a module is what I'm going to do with this extra script that I have now. I'm going to import it as a module. Modules are just extra bits of code like JSON that I'm importing here at the top is a module. So it's a bunch of functionality bundled inside of a script that is your functionality, and it lives at a specific place that allows you to just load it in. So modules contain classes, but not all modules are classes or have classes inside of them. You can also just have functions or values or data inside of a module as well. Modules are very much just a way to load a whole Python file in as whatever is inside of that file. So I have a class in here, but I could very much just leave out the class and just have the function, and I've loaded in just the function from the module. But the class is just a little bit neater. Cool. So then what I'm going to do is, here at the top, we're going to import save state. So what we're doing is, with this creature class, we're now importing this whole script and everything inside of this script, including this class save state with the function save in it. So I'm importing save state. So now what I can do is, I can here create a new variable. And we call it state saver. The last workshop code and files. Let me quickly find that for you. Cool. No problem. That's my notes. I'm not sure if it includes my complete files yet. No, it just guides you through making them. I can share the completed files with you as well if you need those, but that's the text version of the workshop that I gave previously. I will include the completed files in there. That's actually a really good point. I will upload them as well so they are accessible. Cool. So I create a new variable. I'm going to call this new variable state saver. And what's inside of this new variable is from this where we imported the save state. We can use that save state, and then inside of this save state file is a class called save state. So you put the class there and the two circular brackets because you're creating a new version of the save state. I can call this save state something else. I can call it saver, just for clarity's sake. Call it saver. Let's actually call it saver. Cool. We've got a class in here called saver that has a function in it that saves. Cool. So we've got a state saver that from the script save state, we're going to use the saver class, which is the saver class. I'll actually split them like this, which is our saver class. Cool. So there we go. Now, currently we only created a new saver instance of saver, so it's not actually going to save anything. So now we want to save something. So we have two separate variables here that we can save, a cat and a mouse. The data inside of them we can save, so let's do that. So I'm going to go state saver save. So that's the instance of our class saver inside of this variable state saver. So we're going to save using this function. And then what I want to save is, I'm going to save the data inside of a creature instance. So what I do is, say I'm just going to save my mouse for now. I'm just going to type mouse.data. So I want to save the mouse's data. So now we go here, and we run our creature. It does the show for the cat, then it does the feeding of the cat, the show for the mouse, the feeding of the mouse, and then it says save data. Where it gets the save data is the state saver, which is an instance of saver that we got here. That save function here has save data in it. So try and all of that, including the stuff we import. But this is a very confusing, like multi-phrasing of things. So what Python has is it's got same as this import where we import JSON, it's got a few more keywords for just making importing make a bit more sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to say from save state. So from this save state script, what we want to do is we want to import, and then we specifically want to import this class saver. So then we go saver. So from the save state file, we're importing specifically the class saver. So then here where we've got that multi-phrasing weird stuff, now it goes state saver is equal to saver, and then we use our variable state saver to just save the mouse data. Done. So if we run this, it's the exact same thing. And then if we go check this file that we created with the file open write mode where it writes a new file, we've got here a file called saves.json, which has the mouse in it, all the data that we have here. Cool. So all of that works nicely. So now we've got all of these multiple different things, and we're doing all kinds of stuff inside of the creature class, but we don't necessarily want this to happen inside of our feature class, because it's simply a creature class and it's doing all kinds of more things now. So let's create a new file. And our new file we're going to call main.py. So depending on the project that you work on and the different frameworks and all the Python add-ons and the Python services and all of those, the different ones you use, including the UI frameworks, which we'll cover in the upcoming lesson. After we do some basic data, we're going to display that so that some of the frameworks available. Depending on those different ones, you have different ways of calling your main script to run. But for now, it makes sense to just call it main.py. So then our main script, what we want our main script to do is we want it to actually orchestrate all these things. All the stuff we're currently doing here at the bottom of our creature script, we want to just do that in our main script instead. So to do that, we are just going to cut all of that out there at the bottom. So it's just the definition of feature left. And then we also want to just take our saving code and put that in there. So generally you do all your imports at the top. That's just standard so everyone knows what you're doing. But now it doesn't know what our creature is. It doesn't know how to refer to those things anymore. So then what we do is we want to just actually get our creature. So we're just going to import our creature module that we've now made. So we go import creature done. There we go. Whoops. I just showed how to do a from. From creature, we just want to import the class creature. So from our creature file, we just want to import the class creature. Done. There we go. So now, if we run our new script, we call it main.py. You see there, it does the same thing as it did with our creature. Cool. There we go. Now we've got a main script that handles all of this for us. We've got our creature script and we've got our save script. For now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a separate saving thing like this that just does the saving in this weird way. So what we want to do is we want to actually go and we want to load some data as well. And then from there, we want to recreate the experience as we had it before. Just now using this new class and module stuff that we have now. Okay. So the first step is, in the previous one, we had a collection of creatures that we have, and then we would use those collections of creatures. So let's create a new class that we're going to have as our creature manager. So we say it's a class that we're going to define, and then we're going to just call it feature manager. And what this class will do is it will handle the saving and loading of features and all of those things for us. Yeah. So then, after we've defined our class, what we want to do is we want to say what's going to be inside of it. So I'm just going to once again use a, let me just follow this down. Follow this down, so it's not in my eye. So inside the data, in this case, we want to keep a list of all the creatures that we have. Okay. One of my workmates just woke up, so he's going to make some coffee. I'm just going to quickly close some doors. Just sorry, just give me 1 second. Cool. Sorry. I have to close my doors to the office. Okay. So we've now got, instead of a dictionary, we've got a list of creatures. And then what we want to do is we want to then define its constructor. So we define a constructor, and this constructor is going to follow the same pattern as our previous one. So you have yourself as your first parameter, and then your second parameter is data that you give it. No, sorry, that's going to move forward a bit faster. Well, time's up. So we've got our constructor here. And what our constructor does is it just exists. And then inside of this existence of it, sorry, I got sidetracked there. Okay. So we've got the constructor, and we want our constructor to do is at the start of our previous application, we would load the data first. So what we're going to do in this constructor is when you create a new feature manager, it's going to see if that file exists. And if that file exists, it's going to create us a load of that data and assign it to our data that we've got here. Okay. So to do that, I don't want to have to deal with this creating a new version of state saver and handling state saver in that way. I want to simply be able to save and load my data in a meaningful way. So the way that you then incorporate the save stuff inside of your feature manager is you inherit from save. So what inheriting from something means is that my new class will effectively have all the data and functions and things defined inside of my other class that I'm inheriting from inside of my new class. So the way that I would inherit from saver is I would put saver in there. But saver at the moment only defines a save function. So let's put in the load function that we did in the previous workshop. I'm going to quickly copy that over. Cool. Then the self. There we go. So then loading gets fairly interesting. Because if you, in your loader, you open the file, and I read the data from the file. So now I've got the data inside of the file here. And then previously what we did is we simply assigned it to this pets value of ours. And that made a lot of sense for the previous example, because we just had one instance of this. But now that it exists inside of a class, it has to behave the same way that a class does. And we don't necessarily want to define the data for it. We want it to work with the data that we give it. And if it doesn't have any, it needs to then create us some new creatures, otherwise just load them from file. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put in the last thing I did in the previous workshop, and that is to see if we can load the file. And if we can load the file, load it. And if we can't load it, I want to then do something else. In this case, I want to create us a new creature. So we're just going to hard code a bunch of stuff for now just to get us running. So let's put in the try and load the file. So we put in try, we put the loading of the stuff in there, and it's going to then try and load it. But now save doesn't have anywhere to put it. So let's give it somewhere to put it. Good. I'm just going to make that a dictionary, but that can be anything, and you can override it fairly easily, as we saw in the previous workshop. So I'm going to try and open this file and read the data. And if I can read it in, cool. If I can't, then I want to accept file not found error. And there's a lot of different exceptions that we can use, and I will go into exceptions in the next workshop when we go into proper error handling and what happens if the data you receive isn't quite the right data, and how do you deal with that in a safe, sane way, return stuff to the user that it's meaningful to them. So then we just want to say no, save files exist, created new data. And here we're just going to say loaded your saved data. Cool. So then the new data that we created that I mentioned there in my print, I'm literally just going to use some of this. Cool. And that's just copied from our stuff we use to create the new creature. Cool. So now we've got a load, and this data is giving us an error. And the reason it's giving us an error is because inside of each of your functions inside of a class, you have to self, right? So that's self, referring to the object itself. And now it doesn't complain anymore. Now it makes sense to it as well. Cool. So now we've got our class saver. It saves and loads, and if it doesn't have one, it creates us some new data. So at any point in time, we will always have a creature that does exist, and it gives us a creature. So if we look in our creature manager now, because we're inheriting from saver, what we can do is we can use the load function from saver in here now. So let's do that. We're going to go in here. Because it has the values inside of it, we can go self.load. Because your creature manager inherits from saver, it has all the stuff that's inside of it. And what saver does is it loads into its data object. Cool. But this data object and this data object is not at all the same. And the reason they're not at all the same, and it's now going to exist in a weird limbo space, is because you're inheriting from here, so you get this data as well, and they're going to conflict about which data should we talking about. It doesn't know which one we're referring to and how to go about that. So the way we bypass that is we actually go in and we give the constructor that we have to our friend Saver. So let's give it a constructor. And inside your constructor, you always have yourself, because you're constructing a new one. And what we want to pass into here is data. And the reason we're doing that is so we can set the data that's inside of Saver, equal to this new data that we give it. So then what we can do is, here in our constructor for our creature manager class, so when we create a new creature manager class, this happens. What we want to do inside of here is we actually want to go and then you use the same name as the class name, and then you simply want to call the constructor that gets called when it creates itself. You want to call it yourself. So we're going to call it ourselves before we load. We're calling this constructor ourselves. And what we pass in is the self reference that we get with the constructor for our creature manager. And then the self dot. The data from the creature manager we pass in there. So now our savers data is the same as our data that we have there. It's the same data it's referring to now both ways.
So
does that make sense?
State makes sense, but save state.py, is it a module? Is the save state.py that we created a module?
The save state. Yeah, so save
Yes.
state is now a module.
But
yeah.
Sorry, but you you said before a module doesn't have a constructor.
So modules don't have constructors, but there's a class inside of our module that has a constructor.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
So what a module is, it's effectively just a script with stuff in it. And that can be just a loose function, just a bunch of data. So what I can do is I can, in this module of ours, literally put this down. I can just put that in there inside our save state.py file. So inside our save state module, I could just put mouse there. And then if I also import mouse, I can use this mouse as a piece of safe data. It would just work. And that's not a problem. So modules themselves don't necessarily have constructors, but classes do, however. And this class here, this constructor here, I can use it like that. So you can leave this out entirely, and it would still work, because Python is a very forgiving language, and if you put saver in here and you refer to self here, it would still use the same self and still do all the same stuff. It's very forgiving in that way, but then you will get errors down the line, and there's a big chance something can go wrong and you wouldn't know where it goes wrong. So we make sure our saver that we're inheriting from in our feature manager gets created. So we create a new version of this inside of our feature manager, and then we load. So what it then loads is it loads from our file whatever's in there into our creature manager. So then let's just put another function in there so we can actually see what's happening. And then we're going to call it show as well. Make sure it has self in it as the one with the parameters. And then we just want to print brackets our data. And all of this is the stuff that we did in our creature script previously. That we do want to reference what we were doing. I'm just going to comment them out for now as I'm not going to use them right now. We just want to see if what we're saying makes sense. Oh. Whoops. So I just ran my code and it did nothing. And the reason it did nothing is because I simply made a a class. I never actually created a new instance of this class. I just defined what behaviors this class would have. So it's fairly important to actually create and make the code exist and instantiate the code that you want to run. Otherwise, you're going to look a little bit silly like I just did. So we have a new variable called manager. That is our creature manager. And our creature manager doesn't take anything in because our initialization function, our constructor here, only has self, so it doesn't have anything in it. And then we want to just go manager.show. Show. Let's have a look. Cool. So when we created our new manager, it ran this init function, which made sure saver exists. Saver has the same data in it as the data that our creature has. And then it loaded the data from the file, which is this mouse 615 false and the photo of the mouse. So then if we look here, it says mouse 615 false and the picture of the mouse. So it loaded in our data and then we called the show function. So it did all of that, loaded it and then showed it. Does that make sense to everyone? If I lost someone along my description or definitions, please let me know, and then I can reiterate or rephrase, or if I went a bit fast, let me know, please, and I'll make sure to catch up. Awesome. So if that makes sense to everyone, I will continue. Cool. So now we've got a class that saves and loads that we defined. We've got a creature manager that actually loads our creatures in, and that's awesome. It's doing everything that we expect. As we see, we created a new creature manager, and it loaded the stuff that we created previously in this file, loaded it in. That worked as we expected, and then when we said show, it actually showed the data we were expecting to see. Fantastic. Okay. So now we're going to start recreating this behaviors that we had previously. And now the big thing is, I just spotted something as well in my code that I should point out, is if the data didn't exist and it created a new one, it created this single dictionary of data for us. And that is the data that we do want, but it's a dictionary. So that means it's just putting a dictionary where we currently have a list inside of our manager, because we want to keep a list of creatures. So we just need to remember to add our square brackets around the, if you don't have any data, to create new data that we've got here. So that's just the square brackets there, just to add those in. Cool. So we have a creature manager that makes a new creature. Cool. That creates itself and then loads our existing mouse into it. And that's cool. So now one of the functions we had in our previous workshop is we had an add pet. So that's going to become fairly important now, because we actually want to, feed our pets. So let's do that. Let's create a new add pet function. So inside of this creature manager, I'm going to paste the code that we used for the previous workshop. If someone doesn't have that I'll actually share, so that's quite a bit doing. That's the code I'm going to be modifying now going onwards. Cool. So let's make sure it's indented correctly. The first step. Oh, that's the other code. Cool. Cool. So now the add pet function from the previous workshop is in there, and that's not going to work at all. That we have to modify. So the first thing is I'm going to rename it to not be add pet, but add creature. Cool. So now we've got a function called add creature, and then because it's a member of a class, it needs to have the self, right? So put the self in there as the first parameter so it knows what it's referring to. Cool. So now we've got print. So let's add a new creature. Cool. Then for the previous one, we created a new dictionary where we just put all the values inside of the dictionary. That's all going to stay exactly the same. So the change now comes in here. We've got our pets.append new pet. That now changes the game a little bit. So currently, we've got this data here. That's our list of things. So we could go self.data, data, and append. And that will perfectly work. We're appending our new dictionary of data to there. And then if we run the show method, it will, instead of me saying it will, let's show it doing that. So we go manager, let's show. It shows there's only one currently inside of our data. And then we go with manager. I'm making some typos here. Manager, add pet, so we add creature. We're calling this new function of ours that we have in here. And then after that, we just want to confirm that it is actually adding it. So we run the show again. Cool. So manager, show, perfect. So now if we run our main script again, what it's going to do is it's going to say it loaded my data. In our constructor, it loaded in the data. Then which shows the data that we have, cool. And then it's running our new add creature function. So what is our pet called? In this case, it's going to be cat. How old is the pet? 5. What does the pet weigh? 25. What does the pet look like? And then I'm just going to copy the cat emoji that we've got. Apparently I can't copy today. Let's copy it. Copy and put it in there. Cool. So it's just right click to paste the yes in there. So you paste it into the console and then I hit go. Then we get an error. And the reason we get an error is here, if you look at our data that we have, it's been staring us right in the face the whole time. This is not a list. It's a dictionary because it doesn't have the square brackets. So when we added the square brackets here, I didn't initially pick up, and apparently I've been ignoring my notes. Here where we load our data, and we just set the self.data equal to that, we're simply setting it to the dictionary that currently exists in our save file. And there's 2 ways we can go about that. The first thing we can do is we can just put 2 square brackets in here, and that would make it a list and it would work. But then if you later save more stuff to this file, it's going to become a complete chaos. So let's not just do a quick workaround. Actually, let's do the quick workaround. That should be completely fine. Because it is Python, we can cheat a little bit and it will be okay with that. We like Python. So we put our 2 square brackets in our save JSON. Okay. Apologies, I got a phone call then and just tell them to go away. Cool. So in our saved file, we've got our 2 square brackets now that we just added in our save.json. So now, if we go to our save state, if we look here, when it loads and it loads the JSON into the data, it's going to load a list. So now if we rerun the exact same code, you can see there's the square brackets, so it's now a list. So let's add a new pet. Let's call it cat. All is the pet 5. Right, 25. What does it look like? And hopefully, yep, it's still on my clipboard. Cool, I've got my little cat there. Cool. So now it's put my cat in there and everything looks happy dandy. As we can see, we've now got a mouse and a cat. Fantastic. So now if we look here, creature, loads, adds, all of that. But now it never saves. So if we run it again, we're simply going to have just a mouse again, and then it's going to immediately go add new creature. Not quite what we want. So in this add creature of ours, at the bottom, after you appended the new creature to your data, we're going to go and we're going to go self.save. And that's just a function call as well. And now our save function here in saver currently requires data. So what we can do is, because we've now gone and added the data value to the saver, we no longer need it here in the properties of our save. So we're simply going to remove that. And we're just going to add self in front of the data in our save function. So now it will just save the data which it has here at the top, which, because of the inheritance that we have with our creature manager, will be this data, which is our list. Cool. If we save, now our add creature function will go through the process, add the creature, and then save the database immediately. So now when we make any changes to our creature list, by adding one, it will save it through immediately for us. Awesome. So now we've got our list here of creatures, but that's just a list of the data that goes inside of a creature. If we wanted to feed any one of these creatures, it wouldn't let us feed our creature there, because that's just a dictionary with values inside of it. Fortunately, we've created this class feature of ours previously that has feed inside of it. So let's quickly make sure all of these data that we have in here is actually what we want it to be, which is of type creature. So now what we want to do is, when we load the stuff in, we want to convert that JSON that we get into creatures so we can feed them, because we like feeding creatures. So what that would mean is, because there's so I haven't run it again yet, so there's still only one in there. If you've run yours, just leave the second one. I will run us through going through the objects inside of JSON just now. First, just gonna do the creature conversion for us, and then I'll go up to that. So I'm gonna remove our add creature that we have here. So we don't want to modify our save data at the moment. We only want to have our one creature in there for now. And we'll upgrade our thing just now when we do JSON processing. So here in our thing where we do JSON load and then just load it into the data, we actually want to go, and instead of just loading it into the data, we want to go and we want to convert that data that we've got into creatures. So because it's JSON loading it in, it becomes a dictionary. And if we look at our creature constructor, it takes in a data, which is the dictionary of data that we have. So with our add creature removed here, just so we don't yet have to do the loop, we'll do the loop just now. I just want to first show us do the feature thing. Here in our import, we also want to give save, state, and all that access to from the creature file, our creature module. We want to import our class creature. And here, we're simply going to go creature cool. So now it's going to set the data of our creature manager to one single creature. We'll make it a loop to loop through all the JSON stuff that we're loading in. Just now, we're just going to test if this 100% works. And then what we want to do is we simply want to go and show this and see what we got. Run it. Cool. So now what we see here is we see it's doing it twice because we've got two shows in there. So now what we see is it says there's interesting notation for creature.creature. So it's inside our creature module, there's the creature class. Object, so that's an instance of a class, is an object. All things in Python are objects, and they can have different types of values. In this case, the value of it is creature.creature. It can be a float, it can be an int, all of those are still objects. Object is the base class of everything. And then what this is that's just your memory reference, which for now is irrelevant. Just know for different objects, that's going to be a different number effectively. Cool. So it is working. We are loading in our thing and turning it into a creature. But now we want to JSON load the data of the, it becomes a list of dictionaries. So then I remove the creature instance around this JSON.load. So now we're going to do a simple for loop again. I lost my script. Sorry. Need to get my notes back. Then what we want to do is for each of our creature, this is our creature dictionaries inside of our in our self.data. So the reason it's creature dictionaries inside of self.data is because we set our data equal to this data we loaded from our save file. So our save file has its square brackets there because it's a list. So then inside of that list of ours, it's a list of creature dictionaries, which is now inside of self.data. So for each one of those, we just want to first turn them into creatures and then put them back to the values inside of our self.data. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to just use a temporary variable. So that's just going to become temp creatures. And we're putting that equal to 2 square brackets. The reason we're putting that equal to 2 square brackets, I lost the chat for this, sorry. I can't see if anyone is yelling at me. Cool. So we've got this temporary variable, and then that code that we had just now, where we went creature, and then instead of doing the whole JSON.load, we're simply going to do a creature dictionaries, which is the, sorry, that's it. I'm just going to rename it for a sense of clarity. So for each creature dictionary in our now effectively list of creature dictionaries, which is our self.data at the moment, we're creating a new creature. And then we want to add this creature to our temporary list of creatures, which the way you do that is that append that we just did in our example here where we appended stuff to our list, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to go 10 creatures, dot append, and then the thing we're appending is this new creature that we created. Cool. So effectively, for each one of the dictionaries that exist inside of our data, which is now loaded straight from our save file, which is our list of, at the moment, 1 creature, we put it in there, and then there we go. It's now in this temporary variable. Then we just need to reassign our temporary variable back into our data. And the reason we're doing that is effectively our data that we have, which is the same as this data due to this initialization that we did here. That's the same data it's referring to. It first became a list of dictionaries because that's all it had. And then we basically upgraded it to a list of creatures by having a temporary variable. We just added the data that's inside of each dictionary to a new instance of creature, and then assigning that temporary variable we have back into our self.data. You could also do it the other way around and assign the loaded stuff to a temporary variable and then do it the other way around. But due to various platforms I've used, this is the manner I've gotten used to doing it. And you're welcome to do it a different way. It's just how I got used to it for various reasons. Cool. So now what's going to happen is, if we, I'm just going to also comment up one of these shows, so there's only one. We create a new one, it loads it in, and then what it's going to do is it's going to just do a show, which will then show us our list of these creatures. So let's see that happen. Cool. Because there's only one object in our local database, or in our local JSON file, and it loads it in, and for each one of the creature dictionaries in the data, which at the moment there's only one, we'll only see our one guy here. And as you can see, it's creature.creature object, which just means it's this class, it's an instance of that, which is an object, and then that's where it exists at, which is just space and RAM once again, but that's not relevant for now. Cool. So that was a bit of a back and forth, and I hope that makes sense to all of you guys. If I lost someone during that, fantastic. Cool. If I lost someone during that, please yell and I'll reiterate. So I now uncommented our add creature, and I put the second show back in. I uncommented that as well. So now if you run it, oop, that's me when we had controls in. Cool. I'm just going to actually clear this. Cool. So now if we run it, it's going to load our save data. There's one creature in there. Then it's saying, let's add a new creature, which is the start of our add creature function. So let's quickly do that. It's going to be cat. How old is the pet? 5. I'm just away, 25. What does the pet look like? I'm just going to copy the text emoji and paste it in there. And then I immediately get an error. In my save. Ah, that's really weird. Let me figure this out. Oh, okay. It's actually pretty good. So that's slightly embarrassing, but also a great opportunity to just run over debugging. So what ended up happening is when we hit save here, when this was just dictionaries, it was perfectly okay to try and save them straight to a file, and they would just go because dictionaries are JSON compliant. They would just go, not a problem. But now that we've got our creature here, and our creature is actually not just a dictionary. It's an actual class and it has functionality and stuff in there. It failed to save that class an effective memory object to a file because it's not just data, it's a bunch of other code and functionality as well, and that makes sense. So here it says type error object of type class, and then name and all that. That O there is actually referring to object, and that class says it's a class. Just for info's sake, that will become relevant later, but it's simply this type error object of type. So that's the key part here, because this type class creature, it's not known by the JSON.dump function. It doesn't know what to do with that. It simply doesn't know what to do. So the way that we get past this is similar to where we now have a temporary variable that we create creatures from, the data that's inside of them. We now in our save have to create a temporary variable that takes outside of our creature classes this data and puts all of this data inside of its own thing. And then from there it goes further. So let's quickly do that. Okay. So the way you'd go about that is we create a temporary variable. So that's to save data. And we'll put that equal to a list, because we want to have a list of things that we're going to save because we're loading in a list of features. Cool. So then what goes inside of this list? What happens inside of this list is we want to put all the data inside of our features inside of this list as dictionaries. So let's do that. So go for each of our creature objects in our self.data, because that is a list of creatures. And then what we want to do with this is we want to go to save data, dot append, because we're just adding to it the data inside of that. That's our feature object. Sorry, I'm just renaming that variable as well to not be feature objects, but feature object dot data. So we're simply going, instead of saving this whole class, because JSON dump doesn't know what to do with this whole class, we just want this data inside of it to be in our toSave object, which is a list. So we just have now a list of dictionaries. That's the data inside of our creatures. And then we're going to just save that when we're done creating this list of dictionaries. Fantastic. And there we go. Oh, and that replaces that. It should fix itself. Let's see if it fixes itself. It does not. Of course it doesn't. Okay, so this is why I should follow my notes. I did not follow my notes on this, hoping to not confuse you guys too much by introducing too many things. But I see I compiled my notes for a very good reason. And I will follow my notes. Okay. So this initialization that we're doing here, it does make sense and it does work, but it has some caveats when it comes to pre-compiling stuff and doing stuff like these temporary collections here, which you wouldn't do things this way anyway. It's simply easier to describe and make a tutorial of this way and not have chaos. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some cheeky things, and I'll explain a new concept. So inside of Python, there's this concept called duck typing. And duck typing is a concept that is prevalent in dynamic procedural languages like Python. And basically what it means is if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it must be a duck. And the application of that is, we've actually been using a little bit of concepts of that inside of it the whole time. Like here with our new pet name, where we set equal to the input, it makes the variable name inside of the dictionary. It just adds that key to the dictionary with the relevant value. It just adds it in there and it goes for it. And then here with the qt_object.data, if it finds the qt object in there, in our self.data, it's just gonna do the thing and get it over with. It's just gonna happen because if it is inside a self, it will happen. If it's not inside a self, it will not happen. So if it doesn't know what it is, but then it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it has to be a duck. So basically what we can do is, to get this thing to stop complaining at us, what we're going to do is we're going to take this whole definition that we've got here, and we're going to remove all of that, and then the error disappears. Or it should. And then here in our server init and all that saver, we can take that out as well. And then now what's happening is when we create it, it has this list inside of it. Cool. And there we go. What? Yeah, I should not go script, apparently I'm really bad at that. So I have now made chaos. That's not good. This is... Okay. Sorry, let me just refer to my notes. I do apologize. This is not quite good. So, yeah. Apologies for my live debugging. Oh, yes. Okay, so what's it wrong? It's not broken. That's not right at all. Okay, I have made some really awkward choices that's put me in an awkward position, but there's a solution to this problem. So currently, we're just passing the whole list down into our thing. So what I've done is I put back the data here and made it simply take in a value again, and that value here, if we're doing the processing in a different module, it gets confused, and I should have realized that I'm making a whoopsie there. That's my mistake. So what we'll do is our save function is now going to stay the same as it did before. It's just going to have a save. It's going to just dump that data to the file. It's going to be a super simple, no logic save function, and we'll do all the logic on this side. So I realized my mistake and fix it at the beginning of the next workshop. Apologies for that. So what we'll do is we'll do our temporary variable here. So we'll call it our toSave data. And what this is just expecting is it's expecting a simple list of dictionaries. Okay. So for our list of dictionaries, let me just, sorry, I need to get the chat back. There we go. Got the chat back. So we're looking for a simple list of dictionaries. So we'll just generate our list of dictionaries here. And then we'll go for, and then for each one of our features, for each one of our features that we have inside of our self.data, because this is a collection of features due to our load function that happened. And then for each one of those, what we want to do is we want to simply say the toSave data now gets appended onto it creature dot data. Cool. I am totally losing my mind. This is a creature, and the creature is inside of here. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. I am fundamentally confused now about what I did wrong here. Sorry, guys. I completely went away from my own notes here and made some interesting choices that's leading me to be confused. And I'm not quite sure what I did wrong. So I don't want to waste you guys' time with me debugging my own workshop, because that's kind of ridiculous and silly. So would it be okay with you guys if I figured out the problem I have here, and then we simply do the finish of the saving at the beginning of the next workshop, and then I'll cover that and explain what I did wrong and how I debugged the problem I made. Okay, cool. Yes, I do apologize for that. That's slightly unprofessional on my part. Okay, cool. Yes, apologies. I did all my prep work and strayed from that for reasons that now very much make no sense anymore. Because my prep worked and this did not. So that's really cool. Okay. So we've got our saver class we're inheriting from. We can add creatures, although they're not quite saving just yet. But that we will do. Wait, hold on. If that's my problem, then I'm going to be a little bit sad. No, that is not my problem. Sure. Okay, that's yes, apologies. I will fix that little problem of mine and then show you guys what I did in the next workshop and explain the debugging process I went through to get there. Just don't want to do that during the workshop because that's going to take a minute. Okay, so we have a creature manager that creates creatures. It runs the show. It adds a creature. It doesn't at the moment save our creature, but that's quite all right. So I did also see I made a little mistake here. If we, in our data, append our new creature, because this data here is now of the type creature, no longer of the dictionary, we do also have to just create a new creature here. So you just add in a new creature here in your append, and it will make the new creature happen there. Cool. So that makes the data collection now have another creature in it. So let's see that working. What's the new pet called? It's cat. How old is the pet? 5. What is the pet weight? 25. How does the pet look? Let's copy that in. Cool. And then you can see there's now 2 objects in our collection here. It's not quite saving and updating itself as the plan is, but that I'll debug and get back to you guys on. And then, cool. So now what we've got is we've got this feature manager that can add new features and contains and loads and saves our features. On the start of the thing, it loads them in, and then on the adding of them, it will save them at the end of the at the beginning of the next workshop. I'll help you guys make that work so we can save them in. Cool. So then we're almost pretty much exactly where we were with the previous workshop, except now everything's using modules and classes. And you can see how our imports work and how you can import specific things from these different things. So that's just a demonstration of what a class is, and that you can create an instance of a class and inherit from other classes to take up their behaviors. Cool. So that we've got in now. So then the only thing remaining to do to make it be the same as the previous one is we simply wanted to print the same greeting when you start, and then have a little loop that you run through that just makes you add a new creature or see your creatures and those kind of things. So let's quickly just do a loop where you create your greetings UI effectively, and then it's gonna ask you, do you want to create a new feature? If you do, it's gonna let you create one, and then all of those kind of things. So let's quickly do that. So it's also just another function inside of our feature manager. Or what we can do is we can be a little bit fancy, because we can, is we're gonna load in our save data first, and then we want to just print the greeting. So we're going to go print, and then it's just going to be in the first one a few dashes, and the second one print, and then welcome to my creatures, and then I'm just going to copy this line So now what it will do is when we create our manager, it will say if you loaded your data or not, and then it's going to show you a greeting. You can also do the load afterwards. That doesn't really matter. It's just a little greeting that we're doing. Cool. So then after that, we want to, we've now got a thing that shows a greeting. So when we create our new manager, it's going to show a greeting. Now we can have a function that contains a bunch of things that is like a main loop, or we can just do our main loop separately inside of the script. Generally, it's preferred to not do loops that hang the whole program and those kind of things. Like our out feature technically hangs the program while it's waiting for user input to do the next feature. That is fine for some, but you don't want to do like a while loop that is your program loop inside of this. That's just generally not considered good practice. It depends on platform to platform. Some of the UI stuff does do some fancy background things that allow you to do that, but in our use case, we're just gonna first create our manager that makes our new thing, and then we're gonna go, okay, now that we have a manager, what we want to do is we want to ask the user if they want to create a new pet. So then we're simply going to straight up do that. We're going to go if input, and then the question we want to ask the user is, do you want to add a pet? And then we're going to use that same little trick that we used in the last workshop, where we're simply going to take this input, we're going to put it to our uppercase, and then we're going to say it's equals the capital Y. Cool. And if you want to add a pet, then your manager has the option to add a creature. Cool. Then we've now got our data in here. That's our list of our pets. So in the previous one, we had a for loop separately that then would ask you, do you want to feed your pets? In our case, we're simply going to go and put a function inside our manager now, because we've got a manager to do that. We're going to call it feed, capital feed pets. Feed pets takes in the self. I'm seeing another one of my workmates just woke up. I'm just quickly asking to be a little bit quiet. Give me 1 second. Okay, cool. So we've got our function here, that's our self. So then we know we've got our list of our creatures. So then what we want to do is we want to simply go through all our creatures and ask them to be fed, because our creatures has a function inside of it that feeds them. So then we go for, and this is for each one of our creatures inside of our self.data. What we want to do is we want to feed these creatures. So it's creature.feed. Done. So now if we ask the creatures to feed themselves, they will feed themselves. I noticed I left out the colon there at the end of the thing. Yeah, I think I found the problem. Yes, okay. I understand what I did wrong now. Manager.feed pets. It will call our feed function, and that will feed all our pets, which will then make each one of them call their own function and be fed or not fed. Okay. We run this. Do you want to add a new pet? No. And then it runs through our one single pet we've got in there, and our mouse was not hungry. Cool. So the error I'm getting here is simply an error with my error checking software, not my program itself. But there is definitely a problem with the saves that I will get back to you guys on. I once again apologize for that. That's quite significantly unprofessional from me. But yes. So here we've got our creatures that got fed. If we added a new one, there would be 2 creatures that got fed, and simple as that. So now our program runs once, executes once, and then if our pets were hungry, they got fed. If not, that's it. So we don't quite want it to just run the once. We kind of want this thing to be like an app that has a little core loop that it does. So we want it to say, hello, welcome. Welcome to my creatures. And then do you want to add a new pet? If you did, it does. If not, you don't. Feeds them. And then when it's done, we want it to wait a little bit, show us the output, and then do the whole process again. So let's make it do that. And this is not quite a good way to do it, as you can't really leave. Or you can put in a check to make you leave. But for now, just do the first one without one. So there's another loop. We have done a few for loops now, where you go through the thing inside of the thing. But a while loop does a thing while the condition is met. So if we make the condition 2, it will do that thing over and over and over and over. So what we're going to do is, we're going to say while true. We move our manager create outside of this, because we don't want to recreate the manager every time. We want to create one manager and then keep using that manager. So while true, we ask the user, so it's first going to create this load and UI, and then it's going to ask us in a little loop, do you want to add a pet? If you do, it's going to add it. Then after that, it's going to feed our pets. And after it's fed our pets, it's going to just do that again. It's going to ask you, do you want to add a creature? Yes. Or do you want to, so let's actually just run that. Run it. Do you want to add a pet? No. Mouse is not hungry. Do you want to add a pet? No. And then it just keeps looping like that, which is not great. So the way I exited that is I held in control and then hit C and I left to just kill that script execution. Cool. So we've got our feed pets that we feed them. Then after that, let's add in a little bit of a wait. So the way you do wait in a way that just pauses the application for a few seconds and then does the next thing at once is you can use the sleep function in Python. So we're going to go from time import sleep. So from the built-in time module inside of Python that you get with your program, we want to just import sleep. Cool. So then we're just going to sleep for a few seconds. 2 seconds is a number. So there we go. So now it will wait 2 seconds and then do this all again. But now your users kind of stuck in the application where they can only do this over and over and over and over. So what we're going to do is, up here, we're going to create a variable, and then that's going to be called quit app. We're going to set that to false after true. And then we're going to replace our true we've got here with quit app. Quit app. And then the same thing that we have here with our little input. We're going to use that same input. Instead of do you want to add a pet, we're just going to make it do you want to quit? And then yes and no. And if it is yes, we're going to set quit app is equal to false. And that will mean the loop will run until it's false, which means if it goes false here, it won't do it again. Cool, fantastic. Let's check that out. Do you want to add a pet? No. Mouse is not hungry, it waits 2 seconds. Do you want to quit? No. Do you want to add a pet? No, and that's our little loop. Cool. So that is a quick and simple loop. And then it's just going to keep filling up your screen with all these things. And that's generally okay. You can just fill up your screen. But for our little app, we want to just clean it up a little bit. So what we're going to do is there's another function that we can import. And that will just clear that console that we're busy with. So what that is we want to import the system from the OS module. There's a function called system from the OS module that sends commands to your system. So what we do is we just go from our operating system. We want to import the system function, and that's just a little function. And then what we want to do with this function is we want to use it to clear our screen. So after we slept a little bit for the 2 seconds there, we're going to go system, which we just imported there at the top. And then the command on Windows to clear is CLS. I'm not sure why it's CLS, but for Windows systems to clear the console, it's CLS. So then if we bring that closer, so let's just open a new one quickly. PowerShell window. Cool. So now if I go Python, and then I want to run the main, goes loaded your save data. Cool, welcome to pets. Do you want to add a pet? No. Mouse is not hungry. Do you want to quit? And you see that it's cleared. No. And then do you want to add that? No. And that's the little loop we've got. So now we might want to do this greeting at a different place, and you can move it around and all of that, but it's, yeah, it's the basics of a little app loop that will run in the loop and clear itself. And you can do a few basic things with that, and you've got loading of data. And I will figure out the saving and make sure that gets, I'll post that code and the previous workshops code on the GitHub with my notes. You guys can refer to. But other than that, if no one has any big issues, I think this is the end of this workshop. I will post the solution to the problem I have caused. I apologize for that. Cool. Any questions, concerns, anything like that? Cool. Yeah, that's the workshop for today then. Yeah, I do apologize for the little broken bit there. I just don't want to spend 20 minutes on a call with you guys debugging and then coming to the solution and all that, and have you wait for me pretty much to debug. So I will do that in my own time and respond for that. That is fairly bad for a workshop. I apologize. But yeah, cool. Thank you very much for attending. I hope you guys learned something about classes, modules, and how you can use them, and how sometimes things can go wrong very badly, even though you test things beforehand, they still break at weird moments. Cool. Thank you very much for attending.